Global manufacturing is crashing. Let's have a look. Good afternoon, everyone. Florian Heiser here, and welcome to another episode of Heiser Says. I'm relaxing on Sunday, about to go do some chores in the garden, my stein of coffee, and I thought we'd talk about this article, which is discussing global manufacturing, how it's in retreat, and how it will take down the global economy. Now, I should remind everyone that the Australian economy is fairly dependent on exports, and as you can see here, iron ore, coal, petroleum gas, gold, crude petroleum, all, shall we say, simple minerals, stuff we're digging up out of the ground, stuff we're farming and sending over, not really manufactured products that we're sending overseas. And these products are used by other nations to manufacture items that we'll often simplistically import back in. So if global manufacturing is in retreat, and we can just see here, this is the destination, China 35%. I love this website because it gives you a great simple graphical overview of just the exports of our economy, and from that you can understand what the impacts will be for the rest of our economy. So if manufacturing is in retreat, then iron ore prices and other minerals and natural resources that we're selling are no longer as high demand. Let's say people who are in Western Australia hoping the iron ore price bump will put up housing prices are going to be even more concerned. So let's have a look at this article. So, manufacturing is in retreat, threatening to take the global economy down with it. This is German manufacturing has been in recession for more than a year. Well, there you go. Well, see, Australia's lucky. We don't have any manufacturing anymore. I know this because we try and specify Australian-made products, and as architects, it's a nightmare. It is literally impossible to do. It's very hard to do. If the world's factories are any measure, then the global economy is looking rather gloomy at the moment. In June, manufacturing output slipped to a three-year low. It is now tittering on contraction. European output is already in reverse and has been for some time, dragged down to a large extent by German factories which have been enduring recessionary conditions for much of the year. As measures of economic health go, Purchasing Managers' Index, PMI, is pretty dependable. The global PMI, collated by the big investment bank JP Morgan, found the falling June output pointed to manufacturing stalling mid-year. Well, there you go. Currently, JP Morgan's global composite PMI is holding just above 50, the mark denoting economic expansion, while forward-looking new orders PMI fell under 50 in May for the first time since 2012. So maybe we are heading for quite tough times. Part of it can be sheeted back to global trade hostilities, particularly between the US and China, and part of it is just cyclical economic funk. So we can see here, this is the JP Morgan's Global Composites PMI, new manufacturing orders at 49.5, so it's declining. We can also have a look here at Australia's consumer confidence and business confidence. They're also declining. So it all just seems to be coming together, doesn't it? It all seems to be coming together. I know there was a recent YouTube video by John Adams about economic bankruptcy or Armageddon in 2 days. I haven't watched it yet. It's on my list. To be honest, I don't want to watch it because it might depress me too much. So I'm holding off and doing yard work. I'm literally putting my head in the garden. It's one way to work. So, slowdown driving rate cuts. Overall demand is sluggish and inventory stockpiles are not exactly flying off the shelves. Drilling down into the data, the survey suggests confidence is sliding and business investment is likely to stay weak for the foreseeable future. All are regarded as harbingers of a downturn, not a rebound. Well, yes. The advanced July PMIs start rolling out this week, and are likely to have a big say in where interest rates are heading. Well, they're heading down. Hang on, I need to press escape. They're heading down. But where and by how much are the big questions. Markets are pricing around 17 central banks will cut rates this quarter. Whoa. That is likely to include the Fed in the US later this month, the European Central Bank in September, and quite possibly the RBA. Do you think the RBA could cut again? Down to 0.75. What is that going to do to consumer confidence? Who is going to be insane enough to go into insane amounts of debt to buy something now? What? People are just going to wait. People are just going to wait. The South Korean, Indonesian, and South African central banks got ahead of the pack and cut last week. Well, there you go. Things look brighter on the home front, with JP Morgan's economists arguing households, globally speaking, are benefiting from solid wage and wealth gains, largely thanks to the expectation of further rate cuts. Okay, along with a lift in purchasing power from falling inflation. Sure. I'm very cynical about that on day to day. I'm very, very cynical about that. That won't last. Falling rates and rising growth unusual. Basically, it is very, very delicately balanced. Investors are betting on having their cake and eating it too. Interest rates falling and economic growth rising simultaneously. Such a serendipitous mix is rare, but not unprecedented. JP Morgan's chief global asset strategist, John Normand, says the last time the global economy witnessed this pairing was in early 2016, when the Fed didn't actually cut rates, but eased conditions by removing 3 expected rate rises from its forecast. Aside from that episode, it is hard to identify another one in the past 2 decades, Mr. Normand said. One thing to remember, in 2016, that was when our housing sector started cooling off, when foreign investment cooled off in the housing sector here in Australia, like drastically. That was its peak. And we're starting to see the fallout from a lot of those buildings, aren't we? Aside from that episode, I've already read that, Mr. Norman argues it might return this time around thanks to the Fed's frustration with persistent sub 2% core inflation. In other words, the Feds would be comfortable with inflation overshooting its target even as an economy grows solidly. It is not dissimilar to a strategy floated by ECB President Mario Draghi last month, a strategy likely to be sported by the incoming ECB President and stimulus advocate Christine Lagarde. Mr. Normand is not betting on rates cuts as the economy takes off, but notes the chance of this blue sky scenario better than simple history implies. So the markets are easing. Friday saw markets edge back from uber bullishness as the bets of a big 50-point cut from the Fed at the July 31st meeting were taken off the table. On Thursday, the Fed's vice chair and boss of the New York Fed, John Williams, commented about the need to vaccinate the economy was taken as a heads-up. A big economic shot in the arm was on its way. It's better to take preventative measures than to wait for disaster to unfold, Dr. Williams told a gathering of economists. Don't keep your powder dry. With the Fed's self-imposed blackout on pre-meeting comment bearing down, the New York Fed pointed out the good doctor's musings were purely academic and not speculating about the July meeting. Needless to say, US President Donald Trump, a fierce advocate of cutting rates and driving the US dollar down, was far keener on the original interpretation than the subsequent clarification from the Fed. The upshot saw the rates bulls neutered somewhat. Wall Street Industries fell and bond yields rose. The ASX looks like following the lead down on Monday's opening. So markets on Friday, tiny change. The dollar is sitting at 70.4 US cents. RBA to take a breather. The key local snippets from last week, the RBA July meeting minutes from the June jobs figures, pointed to the RBA taking a breather from its rate-cutting binge. The unemployment rate appeared steady at 5.2%, but actually edged up again. The impact muted by a favourable roll of the rounding dice. Okay. Wow. So I'm already skeptical of the RBA's and the ABS's 5.2%. I prefer the Roy Morgan one, where essentially you double it. So they're saying it's 9.2%. And then just the underutilization and those marginally attached to the economy, into the workforce, if you take them into account, it gets close to 20%. 20%. Nonetheless, as JP Morgan's local economists point out, unemployment has risen 0.3 percentage points since February, and it's well above where the RBA forecast it would be. Well, I mean, come on. Ms. Auld points out that interest rate cuts so far have been all about the RBA adjusting its estimate of full employment down to a jobless rate of 4.5% rather than a response to a weak economy. Really? I just thought that was either deceptive spin. Of course it's a weak economy. For the RBA, the pressing issue will be how far unemployment rises before rate cuts and fiscal stimulus stabilize the labour market. So inflation targeting back on the agenda. However, the other key mandate in the RBA's remit, inflation, is likely to be the key issue for the week. I mean, if we have a look, our inflation rate in Australia, and this was, I'll just bring this over here. You can see, in the March quarter, for that quarter it was 0. Wasn't very high. So, RBA Governor Philip Lowe has framed a speech set out for Thursday on the touchy subject inflation targeting and economic welfare. Touchy because the RBA has missed its 2 to 3% target for pretty well 5 years. The times it has been on target, it just snuck in, grazing the 2% post on the way. Some have suggested, given the ongoing misses and RBA's inability to adjust its aim, shifting the goalposts might be the go. Dr. Lowe is made of sterner stuff than that. Sure he is. He will probably use the speech to stretch the importance of anchoring inflation expectations, even if Australia's target is probably a bit higher than most developed economies, and we live in a time when falling inflation seems more structural than cyclical. Dr. Lowe will no doubt stick to his guns that inflation will be back on target by mid-next year. US GDP. There's not a lot of other set economic pieces in the diary this week. The ECB meets to discuss rates Thursday, but the expectation is a cut in September. The preliminary US second quarter GDP data is out Friday. The expectation is a significant step down from 3.1% to 1.5%. It's still growing, but not with great vigor. That's a huge decline in GDP growth. The US reporting season will dominate by the big tech, Alphabet, Facebook, yada yada yada, Trivago, all dropped quarterly results this week. So Australia, what do we have here? We've got all the dates, and you can read that in your leisure. But I think the takeaway point here is a global slowdown in future orders and manufacturing will certainly have an impact on the Australian economy and on our export markets. And I think that will flow through to our consumer confidence. See, I mean, we're exposed to the world so much, and it can have such an influence on us. We'll have to see what happens. So guys, please like, share and subscribe. Ding the bell to see my daily updates, and I'll see you all later. Bye for now.